So to continue, I was talking about the symptoms and signs of hypothalamic dysfunction, and I mentioned that it depends. There are general symptoms and signs and specific symptoms and signs. The specific symptoms and signs depend on which hormones of the hypothalamus are affected by the hypothalamic pathological process damaging effect. So it depends on which hormones are affected by the pathological process, and accordingly there will be the corresponding hormonal syndrome. For example, if the CRH is affected, there will be manifestations of secondary adrenal failure. If the TRH is affected, there will be features pointing to secondary hypothyroidism due to hypothalamo-pituitary dysfunction or hypofunction. It depends on which hormones are affected, will be specific hormonal syndrome. And whether the process damaging the hypothalamus is partial or complete. It's similar to what's going on in panhypopituitarism and partial pituitary failure involving or affecting one or more hormones in particular, or is it a pan damaging process affecting all the hormones of the pituitary? Same also is applied to the hypothalamus. So it depends on the extent of hypothalamic damage, is it partial or complete, and which hormonal producing cells of the hypothalamus are affected exactly. This is number one. Number two, or it might be general also, it might be the symptoms and signs might include lethargy, might include symptoms and signs of low adrenal function. It might include symptoms and signs of thyroid dysfunction. It might include also features of disordered eating, that's disordered appetite and disordered drinking, which will affect the body weight and the water status and the water balance of the body. It might also be in the form of this what we call dysthermia, with body temperature fluctuations due to affection of the thermostat of the brain, which is in the hypothalamus. As I mentioned, the hypothalamus contains the temperature regulating center, or the thermostat. So what happens if the thermostat is involved in hypothalamic disease? There will be body temperature regulations and disordered body temperature regulation. And also there might be symptoms related to abnormalities in or affection of the sexual drive, with sexual perversion and disturbances in the sexual process, including disturbed libido and or also abnormal sexual behaviors and abnormal sexual drives related to hypothalamic disease and hypothalamic pathology, because it contains the centers for sexual drive and sexual behavior. So these also are included among the hypothalamic dysfunction symptoms and signs. So as we see, there are a lot of features: hormonal dysregulations, eating dysregulation, drinking dysregulation, temperature dysregulation, abnormalities in sexual drive, abnormalities in water and electrolyte balance, cognitive dysfunction, emotional dysfunction. Also there might be in some cases epileptic seizures might be among the clinical presenting symptoms and signs. So these are all related to symptoms and signs which are related to a hypothalamic dysfunction. Then let me talk about specific syndromes related to hypothalamic disease, and these include, for example, what we call the hypothalamic amenorrhea. Hypothalamic amenorrhea is a type of amenorrhea which is due to hypothalamic disease, and it is characterized by absent menstruation or very little menstrual blood at the time of menstruation due to hypothalamic disease. And usually is associated with low sexual drive in the lady, is associated with low energy, is associated with disturbed sleep, absent sleep, increased appetite and hunger, abnormalities of reproduction. So as we see, this is related to the hypothalamic effects on menstruation and reproduction through the effects of the hypothalamus on the ovarian functions. So this is the what we call the hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is related to hypothalamic disease and dysfunction. Another type of specific type of hypothalamic disease is hypothalamic hamartoma, which is an uncancerous tumor of the hypothalamus, which affects the hypothalamus and might present with epilepsy in some cases, focal epilepsy. It might present with hormonal dysregulations and the hormonal imbalances. It might present with cognitive dysfunction. It might present with sexual process abnormalities, and this is usually due to a tumor arising in the hypothalamus, which we call it hamartoma. It is a hamartomatous tumor, and usually also in addition to these symptoms, there might be symptoms of hypothalamic tumor, including visual field defects, including blurred vision. So as it happens with pituitary tumors affecting or compressing the optic chiasma and the optic tracts. So there might be pressure effects in addition to the hormonal and non-hormonal effects of the hamartoma, the pressure effects due to mass effects of the tumor in the form of visual problems, and in advanced cases even headache due to the hypothalamic hamartoma. So this is the syndrome. This is a specific hypothalamic disease, the hypothalamic hamartoma. So I mentioned hypothalamic amenorrhea, hypothalamic hamartoma. Also, we have hypothalamic obesity, which is a form of obesity related to the hormonal disturbances and related to eating abnormalities and abnormalities in the energy metabolism. And this hypothalamic obesity might be part of specific clinical syndromes, genetic syndromes, like for example, the Kalman syndrome, which will present with hypothalamic manifestations and loss of sense of smell, Kalman syndrome. And also the another syndrome is the Prader-Willi syndrome, which presents with short stature due to the effects of hypothalamic disease on growth hormone and growth hormone secretion. So there is short stature, there is abnormalities in vision in Prader-Willi syndrome. Also in Bradet-Biedl syndrome, also one of the syndromes of obesity associated with hypothalamic disease. Also Lawrence-Moon-Biedl syndrome involves the hypothalamus and is associated with obesity. Froehlich syndrome. So Froehlich's, Lawrence-Moon-Biedl, Bradet-Biedl syndrome, Prader-Willi syndrome. These are all genetic syndromes with hypothalamic dysfunction and obesity. So hypothalamic obesity is a broad, is a specific type of obesity due to hypothalamic disease, which deserves to be mentioned specifically because it is associated with other neurological and systemic features. This is the as regards the manifestations and the expression of the hypothalamic syndromes and the clinical manifestations of hypothalamic dysfunction. By this, I can say that I have summarized the issue of the hypothalamus, anatomy, physiology, and the neuropathology of